We are here today. Yes, hi Tiffany. We are here today to talk about elementary. I am so excited. This is such an interesting phase. It's also humongous because they start as these little 5-year-old kindergartners, and then it goes all the way to a fifth grader who's a person. So I'm really excited to talk about it today, but I'm also really excited that it's both of us, that I have you, Tiffany, here, who is in this phase, in this stage, but also just has so much amazing, wonderful knowledge about parenting and how to do it, but also about how to be a person ourselves and just all sorts of things. So I know a lot of people who are watching this probably know you, which is awesome. And I am Lauren. So I'm Lauren Cook, and I am the director of children's ministries at Resurrection Overland Park. I have been doing this job for 2 years, but before that, I was an elementary school teacher. So I taught fifth grade and sixth grade for 4 years. It was amazing. I loved almost every second of it, which is probably what most of us can say about our work, but it was great. So I taught for 2 years in Oklahoma City and 2 years in Kansas City. So I've seen a lot of things in lots of different communities. And then obviously in my role now, I'm a teacher, but in a totally different way, and do a lot of things outside of it, but just get to spend a lot of time with elementary kids. And I know that those of you watching that know me know that I do have a daughter she is only 2.5. So she's in the early childhood phase, but it's coming. Elementary is coming for me, which is why I'm excited to be a part of the conversation. But also just knowing that I do get to work with our elementary kids all the time. So Tiffany, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Thanks for inviting me to be in conversation with you. My name is Tiffany Baker, and I also have an undergrad degree in elementary education. I taught second grade and then went to seminary and have a degree in theology. So um, I have some diverse interests. I have 3 children. I have a fourth grader boy, and I have a second grader girl, and then I have a 4.5-year-old boy. So I am very much in this elementary phase.
Yes, which is exciting. I love that you kind of have the whole spectrum. So it'll be, I can just know that you'll have some really good knowledge and stories for us. And I think we connect most with stories. So I'm really excited for that. So a lot of you might have watched the early childhood video. I know that we've got lots of families at Overland Park, but across our whole church who obviously have more than one child who might span more than one age. So if you did or if you didn't, a lot of what early childhood thinks about is fun, wonder, love. I mean, we all, either you think back or you still have one, of those little faces that just are exploring the world and they're learning what it means. But everything's kind of fun and it's about loving them and just making them feel safe. Whereas all of a sudden they come to kindergarten and it's like, oh my gosh, it's not so much just about fun anymore. It's like I have this human person who I need to turn into an older human person that knows how to do things and knows how to live in this really crazy world. Especially in the last year, it's changed. The world has changed. The way we parent has changed. Everything has. So a lot of what we want to talk about today is just how you raise a human and how you do it at in this stage where they're not necessarily developing basic skills anymore, but they are developing quickly and they are learning, they're becoming intellectual. There's so much that they're becoming social in a new way. So we really want to talk about all of that. But to start, we also want to talk about when you are raising a toddler, it takes your whole entire focus. I am right there, and so I know it takes everything that I have to just love her, to be patient, to teach her, to make sure. I mean, just all the things. I won't go into it, but it takes kind of everything. And then I know that once you get to elementary, you tend to begin. I'm not going to say you have all the time in the world, but you tend to begin to have a little bit more space for yourself. And I know, we're going to talk a lot about kids today, but I kind of wanted Tiffany we both want to talk a little bit about what it actually means to think about who you are as a person too in this stage and how that affects how you parent. So, Tiffany, I would love for you to start because you are in this stage. So, can you speak to the idea of having, do you feel like you do have a little bit more time or space to think about who you are? Or, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Lauren. Like whenever I encounter a mom like you who is in the thick of it and I call them the blurry years because really they're so blurry, you hardly remember them. You're so tired, you're so exhausted, and they're just kind of blurry in your memory. So once you get past the blurry years, I think it's really fun. And I mean, the first thing I want to say about parenting elementary age children is it's really fun. I love parenting older children. And I feel like that's kind of an unpopular opinion, right? Like, you see the Facebook memories pop up and the memories of younger babies and toddlers, and people say, "Oh, I missed that stage. Where did it go?" And when those pop up in my feed, I think, "Oh, my baby was so cute," and I'm really glad that now she's 8. So they
Yes.
they can do so much for themselves. They're fun. They can have conversations. The things that I can talk about with my kids just astounds me. And they do become their own people. They just become these amazing human beings, and it's fun to watch. So I love this stage. I really do.
Yeah. That's awesome. Believe me, I am excited and I am with you on that. When I see pictures of like, when she was that first year, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness we are moving past that one because that is a blurry year, that first year. But they all really are right now still. So I agree with that. So one thing that I have struggled with in the early childhood stage is taking care of myself or even thinking about some of the stuff that I have gone through because we all know like birth and those first couple years take a lot of you. And there's just a lot of emotion that comes with that. And then obviously just being a parent, that's a very emotional thing. That's probably the most emotional thing we ever do is become a parent. And so I want to hear from you what you think about, a lot of what we worry about as a parent. Those worries, yes, they come from this world that we live in. That's a really scary, crazy world sometimes, but I wonder how much of that fear comes from us and just things that either we experienced and we don't want our child to experience, or we things that we did that we don't want our child to do, things, how those things overlap because of things that are inside of us. So I feel like I have just started to even work on some of this that I have and that I'm putting onto my daughter. But now that you're kind of fully through and you're in this elementary stage, what do you think? What do you think about that?
Mm, yeah, Lauren, I have shared before that when my son was 3, so early childhood phase, he had a lot of phobias. He developed a lot of anxiety and phobias, and normal ones like he was scared of the dark and he was scared of strangers, but then also some really weird ones like he wouldn't ride a bike, he wouldn't play on a playground, he wouldn't go near dogs, he wouldn't get on an escalator, he wouldn't go on a boat like when we went to the lake. And eventually it got to the point where he wouldn't get in the bathtub because he was afraid the shower would come on. And that's when I reached out for help. And I didn't at the time know of anyone who could see a 3-year-old. Now I do. Now I know resources. But I knew that I had a lot of anxiety. And so I started seeing a therapist when my son was 3. And I haven't stopped. I've gone ever since. So that was actually a really great thing that happened because children invite us to heal our old wounds, right? And our fears and our anxieties. And when you kind of function as an adult, but then you have this child who has experiences, and it's so gut wrenching because you love them so much that it just kind of brings up all this fear and anxiety and worry that has to be managed, right? Because otherwise that fear and anxiety and worry just kind of crushes a child.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in, if you have an anxious child, first of all, you're not a bad mom, you're not a bad dad, you're not alone. But I would invite the parent to get curious about his or her own anxiety and how that might be impacting or affecting your child. So, for example, my husband had a lot of anxiety when he was a kid about school. School was not easy for him. And so when it was time to make the decision about whether to send our first to kindergarten, he had a lot of anxiety about like, because he had a summer birthday. So it was like, are we making the right decision? Are we sending him too soon? Maybe we should hold him. And he has a lot of anxiety about how well our son is doing in school. But that's really about his own anxiety, right? And his own fear. And for me, I didn't struggle in school. And so I don't have a similar anxiety about how well they're doing in school, but I was a very quiet kid. I was kind of like the observer. And I have a lot of fear about, are they fitting in well? Do they have friends? Do their friends really see them and appreciate them? And so I might have the tendency to over involve myself in their social life or in their friendships if I'm not careful, because I'm operating from a place of like, oh, what if they're lonely like I was, or what if they feel like they don't fit in like I felt like I didn't fit in. And so yes, so it's very much about kind of feeling your own stuff and having the support to do that. Finding the support.
And that's what I have seen a lot in the church this past year. I have seen lots and lots of anxiety that's come to the surface. It's always been there, but this year has brought it out in a lot of us because our anxiety is more intense. It's all the time. We're always worried. This year has been where you really can't even ever set it aside. So it's becoming consuming, and people are seeing that they're putting it onto their children, or we're seeing it and we're saying, like, oh man, I did this driveway visit with your kiddo and it was awesome, but they are, they're struggling, they're having a hard time. And some of that's because their entire world has changed. And some of it's because they're surrounded by anxiety at this point and by fear. And so those are things that, aren't even, we all have our own stuff. We have our own stuff that we came with in 2019 and all before that. And then we have this year. And so it's just been so much. And I know that as a church, that's my job, is to come in and support people and love parents and kids and everybody. And I'm trying to hug the whole family. But at the same time, we're also here because we know who can help you. And so that's something that we've really, or specifically me at my campus, I have been trying to find all across our church, who are the people that can help. And we have a really great congregational care department who has just all these amazing people. We've reincorporated play therapy. We've got lots of stuff. So from a church standpoint, that's what I have seen, especially with my elementary schoolers, because they're the ones who can communicate how they're feeling a lot better. Obviously, my early childhood kids, it comes out. My daughter, it comes out in that anger, frustration, she hits or, does something like that. But when they're in elementary, that's something else that's new, is that they can tell you, but they can also hide it. And so that's another thing that I've really been trying to work on as a children's ministry person, is when I get to connect with my kids, is trying to be another resource for them besides mom and dad, where I can just try to get out some of that stuff that's also hidden, because they're starting to know how to do that too, which is scary, but also part of why we're having this conversation, I think, and part of why we give resources like this is to talk about how to figure it out from our point of view, and then also how to take care of them and how to teach them to be a loving person who feels safe, and all these things, so that they can communicate in healthy ways. So I really I love all of that. I also started therapy this last year, and it was a game changer, and I will be in it forever. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that's another thing that I just want all parents to know, is that therapy is amazing. Like, you do not have to have something wrong with you, because we all have something wrong with us. And there are people out there who will literally just listen to you. And as a mom, I was like, yes, I just need someone to just be a sounding board and just help me process. So, I think therapy is great, and I really love normalizing it for our parents and for our families and even for our kids. Um, so therapy, I feel like one thing, as we start, yes, as we start to talk about things like that, it kind of it helps me to move into the next thing I know we wanted to talk about, which is setting healthy boundaries or healthy routines or expectations in your family. I think for me, I've started to set a boundary that my husband, my daughter, and I all are going to have people that we can talk to outside of our home. I used to think that was, I didn't grow up having that as a normal thing. Like, we were a pretty insular family, partially because we moved a lot. So I moved like 10 times in elementary school. So I didn't ever have a lot of relationships outside of my house. And I think I've come to learn that an expectation in my home is that it doesn't have to just be us three. It's actually, we're going to create a village, and it really does take that. And there's all these things. And so while I know that's not a rule and we'll get to that, that's something that we've a good transition that we have also worked on. But what do you think when you hear about for your elementary kids who, like we said, are starting to communicate? They're starting to have even more solid opinions than they do. I know all the other ages have opinions too, but they're starting to really form them. They're starting to learn about other friends who have other opinions and whose homes run in different ways and all these things. So when I say healthy boundaries or expectations, what do you think about?
Yeah. So I have a mantra and a phrase that I repeat to myself a lot, and it's that I have permission to write my own rules for my family, and I want families to know that they have permission to be a family in a way that works for them, and that what should be of utmost priority to them is how it feels inside their family and not how it looks to
Mm,
everyone else outside the family.
yeah.
And so, we are kind of a weird family. We've done some things that are kind of weird. Like our kids are not in a lot of extracurriculars. They're
Mm,
just not. And that's pretty different for where we live. Um, they're in one each. Our 4-year-old isn't, but our elementary age kids are in one extracurricular each. We don't go to every birthday party that we get invited to.
yes.
We have a lot of white space on our calendar. We like to keep it that way because I don't want to miss this time with them. I don't want to be running around frantic all the time. I want there to be connection. And so in order for there to be connection, we have to pad our schedule with a lot of white space. We have to let go of some extra commitments. And that has kind of been a blessing of COVID, right? Like
Yeah.
families have said, the extra space we have now is really nice and really helpful, and our family's loving it.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that.
when our kindergartner started kindergarten, I communicated with the teacher that he would not be doing homework. That
Mm,
our expectation for him is that he goes to school and he works hard while he's there and he pays attention and he engages. But then when he comes home, we wanted him to be able to play. And the teacher was great about it. But I was prepared to do what was best for my child and my family, even if it meant the teacher thought I was weird. And again, just prioritizing what feels right for your family over and above how it looks. We had family pictures done, and I let my kids pick their own outfits. So
Ooh,
I will never have those photos of the perfectly color coordinated family. I don't think I'm ever going to have those. But what I love about looking at them is that you can see the personality of each of my kids in what they chose to wear. And that's what I want, right? I want a family photo of my actual children. So that's what I mean when I say, you get to write your own rules. And as a rule follower, I'm a recovering rule follower. And so, the fact that I feel so adamantly that that the health and wellness in my family is more important than following the rules. um, speaks to how important I think it is that families write their own rules.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. And what I really love that you kept pointing at is that that's what feels right for your family. And so it's really good, when we're having conversations like this, it's not for us to tell everyone watching what to do and how to do it, because that will never work. I mean, all of our families are different. And even listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, my family's so different. But that's good, and it's because my husband and I, we are both, if you're an Enneagram person, we are threes. If you're at Clifton Strengths, we are achievers. Like we are doers. That's what we are. And part of that is going back to our first topic, where we are trying, there are things we need to work through so that we don't raise an ultra three who's trying to do everything all the time. But also, yeah, knowing that like we thrive on routine and we thrive on being busy, and that's okay. Because I know I do. I think guilt is just, that's a whole nother conversation, which we actually will have on one of our weekly discussions. But there's so much guilt about how you set up how you do life and how you do your family. And it, that is what will crush us, not doing what you want to do, whether that's doing stuff all the time or not, keeping a lot of white space. That's not what's gonna, those are the good things. And what's the only time that negative will come into that is all that guilt we place on ourselves because of what we see other people doing that we think might be right. And I think right now we're in this world of social media that's like terrifying, because especially this year, that's another thing that's changed, is like you said, I have heard so much about families that are just finding joy in being together. There's a lot of sadness because there's families who can't be together. I don't want to belittle that, but for a lot of us, we've found that, oh, I've gotten to say no to things. I've gotten to have the space. And I think that is really good. But one other thing that's come with this year is the social media, because it's all we do. We can't go anywhere else. We can't see anyone. We can't talk to them. And so the way that we're finding connection right now is social media. And while that serves as a tool, it can be a positive tool. It can also be a really negative tool, in that we're constantly looking at what other people are doing and what other people's lives look like. And I've just had so many conversations with families at church who are just feeling so stressed out because they're like, oh my gosh, but I see this other family and they're doing this. And then I see this child and he's like already, 8 years ahead of mine, and all these things. And so again, the comparison game and guilt and all these things are a whole nother conversation. But I think what Tiffany makes just you make a really great point, that it's about what works for you. And as you guys, everyone listening, you've already heard, like, us two have totally different ways we work. And I love that. Like, I think that's what makes families cool. That's what makes our kids cool. Because our kids are just like, I just think they're amazing, because especially in this stage, like as they become their own people, I love just watching how different they are and how cool they are and how they're all interested in different things. And the only way that I think we can facilitate like it becoming okay to be different is if we make it okay for our families to be different too. Because if they don't see that at home, they're not going to feel that that's okay at school and on the soccer team and wherever else they are. Being different won't become a good thing unless they see that at their house too. So I really like that. And so that also helps us move into kind of our last thing, and this is the big question that I get all the time in the church is, okay, I have this human, and I have to raise them, and I want them to become a kind and loving person who is, who loves others, who there I can't even list everything. So I'm like, there's so many things we want our kids to be. I think that, like we talked about at the beginning, we kind of need to work through what are appropriate expectations, and not because based on the stuff we bring to the formula. And there's ways that we set boundaries to keep our kids healthy and safe and loved and those things, and keep our families healthy. But then beyond that, like, how do we get them to be people that are in this world and they're just trying, they do the right thing. They're trying to make the world better. They love people. They accept everybody. I think in this past year, beyond COVID, there has been a lot of unrest in our world. And all of a sudden, we're seeing that, like, wow, there's a lot of changes that a lot of us want to see in the world. And what we know is that we might not see it in our generation, but we will see change with our kids is, and that's how we raise them. We need to raise them to be kind and loving and accepting and, you know, but then it's like, that's a lot of pressure, like, are we really going to change the world through our children if we have no idea what we're doing because none of us have any idea what we're doing? So I hear that all the time. So I want to finish with that. Tiffany, what do you think about, you're in this. So what do you and your husband talk about, or, maybe your other kind of listening partners that you work with in your family? What do you talk about when you come across situations that are, you're like, okay, this is one of those moments, what am I going to do to raise or to show my child what it means to be loving or kind or accepting or any of the other things you can think of?
Right. I mean, I think, um, first of all, taking like a huge deep breath, right?
Yes.
Because it's true that none of us has ever done this before, right? Like I say to my oldest, I've never raised an 11-year-old before. So we're both learning. And in some ways it's easier than we make it out to be. So like if I want to raise a loving, generous, kind-hearted person, then really all I have to do is treat my children
Mm.
the way I want them to treat other people. So, you know, children who are loved will love other people. And children who are allowed to voice an opinion will be able to speak up when necessary. And children who are listened to will learn how to listen. And children who are, you know, generosity, one thing we do at Christmas is that our kids buy gifts for each other with their own money and they love it. And I feel like, if we want our kids to be generous, we give them practice getting to be generous. And so it is a huge daunting task. And I think it's like a little bit easier than we make it out to be, that, we treat our children with respect and we value, one thing about elementary age is they have way more opinions, and I have to listen to them, right? Like that doesn't mean that they always get their way, but it means that when they tell me that something I did hurt them,
Mm.
then I bear the responsibility of listening to that and responding to that and apologizing for that, right? Like I apologize to my kids. And um I had a mentor once tell me that her daughter, um for her son, so my mentor's grandson, for his first birthday, they invited everyone to write a letter that he would open on his 18th birthday. And so as she was thinking about what does she want him to know when he's 18, right? Like, of all the things she could say, what she really wanted him to know with certainty was that he was beloved. And she's like, if you know with certainty that you are beloved, then everything else will fall into place. And I found that so profound, and I try to hold that in my mind often. And so, one of the phrases I often think is connection, not correction, right? Like I want to be connected to my kids. It's not my job to fix them. They're not projects for me to fix. And I don't like to be like, I don't like it when I'm in a relationship where I feel like the other person is trying to fix me, right? Like that doesn't feel loving and safe. So, allowing our kids, and again, that doesn't mean they get away with everything, and it doesn't mean you set no limits, but it means that you're always thinking about connection above correcting their behavior or fixing them or fixing a problem. And I think that is that's the roadmap I'm using anyway. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah. Which I love hearing. I am a fixer. I'm a fixer and I'm working on that in many areas. So I really appreciate like hearing that. And I think too, from a church perspective, that's also what we're here for, is that we're here to show your children how loved they are and to teach them about a love that's greater than, than they could ever imagine and that goes beyond their circumstances. And so I think a lot of us, we're loving parents and we love our children more than anything in the world. And I think probably everyone watching this is the same way. But I also think we all know people or we have had personal experiences where, sometimes it's hard, your home isn't always the most loving place, or there's lots of different situations, but that's why, again, like why we have other people and why we have our church that we love so much is because then it's just another place that's showing my daughter that she matters, that she's important, that she's loved, that she can be whatever she wants to be. There's lots of things that I feel pressured to teach her. So I like what you said, that it is easier than we think, and that, that I just try to model for her. That is what I have learned the most through even my education, is just trying to model for really any age. And then, but also providing her with a space with other people who can help to support that. And so that's what we're here for too. And what I would hope anyone watching knows, that our goal at church is not just to watch your child while you're at church, but to teach them all these things that we want to help you make them be. And that, like you said, it all starts with love. It all starts with love. I think that's when I see a child who feels like they aren't loved, I think that's why I do my job. That's exactly why I do my job. Because I want everyone to know that they are incredible and that they are powerful and that they are, smart and kind. And I just want, I think it's modeling, but it's also telling them that, like, just saying it. I just say it over and over. Like, I think some of my kids at church, and some of you who know me, this, they're just like, Miss Lauren, stop. I know I'm amazing. And I laugh, but I'm like, you got to tell them. And I think sometimes we get worried that's going to make them like, what's the word? It's going to make them feel like too much about themselves. Like they're going to be, they're going to think like, oh, I'm awesome. And, it's going to go too far. But I don't think when we use the right words and we're modeling it at home and we're pairing it with things like respect and, being kind to others and putting others first and serving. And I think that's why service is big, even in children's ministry, because when you pair the amazing things that a child is with the amazing things you want them to do, then those things can come together. And I think it takes a village. So it's another time I'm going to say that. And I think it doesn't matter how old they are, that, and that's why we have ministries for every single age, even adults, because we all need multiple people who are there and who are on our team. And so I think I just think of my husband and I lived in Oklahoma City for a couple years, and we came back here. And really one of the biggest reasons was I needed her to be in this church. Like, I think, and I'm not saying this church is the one, but just but because I have personal experience here and I was raised here, and I had people here who told me I was loved and told me I was important and told me that I mattered. I needed her to have that, because I knew that I'm going to work my best to give that to her every day, but I fail because I'm a human and I can't do it all by myself. So I like that. Okay. So before we go too long, I want to come back to you. Yes, go.
Really fast. I just want to say that like one of the most loving things we can do for our kids is love ourselves.
Yeah.
And like, just like we choose connection over correction with our kids, the same is true for ourselves. And so like, I think parents deserve a giant dose of self-compassion, because every parent that is watching this, I know is trying their very hardest, and I know loves their kids, and I know is probably thinking about all the ways they could be better. And that just like learning to show yourself compassion and love yourself is actually one of the most loving things you can do for Okay.
Love that. I love that because that's another thing I'm working on. And I agree. So I think that's what I want to add. It's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to end with, is that if you're watching this, like, you're awesome. Like, parents, I just think we need to be lifting each other up at every second possible, because we all know this is the hardest job we will ever do. This is the hardest thing. We don't have a rule book. We don't have a manual. Even these videos will not tell you what to do. What we want them to do is we want them to encourage you. And we want them to tell you that we love you, that you are awesome, that you are powerful, that you are loved. And so that then you can carry that back into your home. So I think, our class is called Let's Show Up, and you guys are doing that right now. Like, you're showing up. We're showing up for you. You're showing up for your kids and your family. And if we all show up for each other as a community, I just can't even imagine the good that's going to just come of being a loving community. So I'm really excited. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here. This was, oh my gosh, this was amazing. I had so much fun. I know that I really hope that people, listen and they can just feel the passion and excitement from you that I do. So thank you so much. All right, everybody, we will finally wrap this all up and just say that we love you, and we'll see you in the discussions on Wednesday nights.
Okay.